Hi, everyone. Today I am interviewing Justin Broady. So, Justin,
Yes,
how are you today? What's new?
I'm good, man. I'm good. What's new? Not much. Same old, same old.
What have you been up to?
Up to, um, man, just day at a time, one day at a time.
Mhm.
Uh, Trying to stay focused.
Okay. And when you say trying to stay focused, what are some of your distractions?
The moment, I guess you could say, is distracting. Um, Typology, for example, can be distracting.
Yeah.
I feel like my mind is always going in one way or another. And so it's not a matter of if I'm thinking about something or doing something. It's a matter of is what I'm doing intentional, and is what I'm doing focused on the right thing. So
Right.
that's the challenge for me.
Okay. And for you, what would be the right thing?
That depends on the moment, but uh, ultimately, I feel like that the right thing to be doing in any given moment of my day is going to be based around the goals that I've set.
Hmm.
So, and this is taking some work for me to carve out, but um, every week, basically, I sit down and have a goal setting meeting, and in that meeting, what I want to do is accomplish a variety of things. And so during my week, I have that board of goals on my mind at all times, and I'm trying to make sure that I'm in some way moving towards that end. And so the goals kind of function for me as a compass
Right.
and serve for me to keep me going that right direction.
Hmm.
And those goals, the way I formulate those goals is a whole other discussion, but that's what I mean by that.
Okay. So it's something which, by setting some structure, you provide yourself some goal, direction, a trajectory in which to work towards, as it were.
100%, absolutely. And if I don't,
Mm,
then I can get, like I'm saying, unfocused and distracted and lost in the moment.
mm,
I'm
exactly.
doing whatever I feel like I'm doing, which is usually some form of distraction,
Mm.
mental distraction.
So, why is typology so distracting for you?
It could be typology. It may be theology.
Ah, yes.
Yeah, it could be uh, any subject, entrepreneurship, business, or leadership, philosophy, some form of understanding, some way to engage the mind and grow in some form or area. And so it doesn't matter. Typology is great. Like, I think it's a good tool that fits within my worldview of being an applicable source of growth. And so it just becomes, and it's fascinating. It's just so fascinating. And part of why I find typology fascinating is because there's an element of truth in it, and um, there's also an element of so there's objective truth that's important,
Hmm.
and then there's subjective truth. And so the thing about typology is that there's so much subjective conversations happening within the realm of typology.
Yeah.
And so as you know, as I said in the questionnaire, that I had mentioned that I had been in the fields of OPS and MBTI, and talked to a wide range of different sort leaders in those areas and different sources, and um, enjoy the subjective elements of typology that you can experience an actual real time application. But then there's another element of typology that's trying to get to, I think, objective truth.
Hmm.
And an actual understanding of the essence of what's happening. And so I think that's what keeps me going, is that there's this, I haven't quite found all the answers yet. And I think there's to some degree, the quest for authenticity is also built into the typology journey for me. And so, so there's this contrast of authenticity and objective truth happening in the same moment. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Thank you, Justin. So let's talk about, I guess it is an elephant in the room, but the obvious thing to talk about, I think, is, well, YouTube channel.
Yeah.
What made you start up this YouTube channel? What was the driver behind that?
Oh man, YouTube. So a passion to share the truth, honestly. I mean, that channel is geared towards men. So my passion is to help men be stronger men.
Yeah.
And raise up leaders. And again, I have a desire to see the truth make an impact. And so it's a way for me to teach the truth in a way that's helpful to people and makes an impact on people.
Okay, that makes sense. And then watching through some of the videos, it seems to me that on the one hand there is a clear example. There's some kind of masculine ideal around strength, around taking responsibility, and also that seems to me to be influenced somewhat by faith as well.
Yes. Yeah. So it's within an objective worldview, is what I would say.
Yeah.
Because within an objective worldview and discovering the truth, the objective truth, and then having an emotional impact on who you are, on who I am, or who people are, who men are, within that framework.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and shooting for that ideal, absolutely, and providing it a target. Yeah.
So I guess a question I'd have is, how much involvement did you have in either refining or adding to that framework, or was that a framework largely received?
The Christian framework?
Yeah, I could say that. As in, is any of it based on your thoughts, your critical examination, or is it?
Oh yeah, that's good. So here's my story, man. I was in a season of hedonism.
Okay.
In my early years, early 20s.
Yeah.
And that led to an all-out addiction, actually, to drugs and alcohol and sex. And that brought me to a personal kind of rock bottom.
Mm-hmm.
And in that place, I didn't want help at all from anyone. And yet someone had tried to argue with me that I needed help. After some pushback and some push and pull, ended up listening and taking the chance to look into it and examine it for myself, and experienced subjectively life change, radical life change from making that decision. And I began to continue more and more and more life change from committing to that decision to follow Jesus. Now, I had to stop at some point, because that's all subjective experience, which I think is extremely valuable and necessary. But objective truth requires that we actually are corresponding experience to reality. Because anybody can have an experience. That doesn't tell me whether or not that experience corresponds to the truth. So I had to pull out and go, hey, is what I'm feeling, what I'm experiencing, is this true in the real world? And I had to do my examination, because I do believe there is only one reality. Only one. Now, there's multiple perspectives by which we can go and pursue that reality logically. And I want to do that. I think we should. But I think there's one ultimately that we're trying to discover and we're trying to understand. So I appreciate like multiple perspectives of that reality, but I would argue that there's only one. And my logical formulation of what's objectively true led me to believe that that conclusion of a Christian worldview is the best explanation of objective reality.
Okay.
So those two correspond. And yeah.
So am I right in saying, therefore, that you were someone who, at least starting off with, was very much taken up by subjective experiences? The experiences you were undergoing, how you felt about things, your perception of events, and to some degree that also somehow led to a sort of a downwards spiral in your life.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that it was almost coming into contact and appreciation of said objective truth, in this case, Christianity, that creates a sense of objectivity here. This is the truth. This is the guiding post in which I'm now on an upward cycle rather than a downward cycle.
Yes.
Is it accurate to say, Justin?
Yes.
All right. Thank you. Let me see if I can ask you some more questions. So, what I'd like to ask is, in what situations are you at your most confident?
Confident. I think that when there's a challenge, I would say, is when I'm most confident. When there's the biggest challenge in front of me that I can tackle, or the biggest mountain to kind of pursue and go after, whatever that mountain is, I think it gets me energized around whatever it is that I need to be accomplishing. Yeah. And I don't see the same worst case scenario type fear that many people would experience. I see possibility, and I see a reality, actually, because again, my vision of the future is always corresponding to the reality. Mm-hmm. And my vision of the future is, in my mind, tangible. It's not ethereal or fantasy. It's not it's not disconnected from the actual world. Mm-hmm. And so when I see a challenge like that, I get motivated, I get excited, and then I rally everybody around that shared goal of whatever we're doing, whatever mission that we're on. And we're going to go that way with full force. And we're going to get some rejection along the way. We're going to get some pushback. We're going to have some boulders come rolling down the mountain and try and take us out. But we're going to keep going, and we're going to meet that challenge head on.
Thank you. And that tangibility of the vision you have.
Yeah.
Has that always been there for you, or is that a more recent thing for you?
That's a good question, because, earlier in my life, before spiritual transformation, there was never really a clear, I wouldn't have been considered a visionary by any means, right? Today, I hold that stance of being a visionary. That someone that does see into the future and has a clear vision of what it could look like, and it excites me, it excites people. But early on, it wasn't that. It was just clearly, as a kid, nothing but sports and social life, sports and social life, and girls and parties and those kinds of, and a life of hedonism. And that's all it was. It was never like, hey, what am I going to do in the future?
Right. Okay. So much sort of caught up in the moment. And what got you into that hedonistic life? What was it about it that you found drawing for you?
Yeah. So true story. I was nothing but sports growing up. Early on as a kid, nothing but sports. Yeah. My dad was high up in baseball, played basically pros, and didn't make it to the pros though. And so I don't want to say, he hasn't said this, but I would say that he was living vicariously through me in a lot of ways to get me to that level. And so I was a competitive athlete playing in, high level tournaments and Little League World Series by the time I was 10. And so that was my childhood of just what I did. And I was on that path. And then when nasty situation at home, dad ended up leaving, stepdad came in. And I remember when that moment, when my dad left, it was like, I just cut off my emotions at that point in my life and said, I'm going to do this on my own. And I'm going to go my own way. I don't want to depend on anyone. I don't want to depend on anyone depend on me. I'm going to go my own direction. But there was a pain in there that I was not going to let anyone else see. And I felt like I had lost my identity in that moment. I endured a lot of personal pain, but I wasn't going to show you that. I was going to show you a facade of strength. And so with that avoidance of pain came hedonism.
I see.
All of a sudden, that made me feel really good. I could hide the pain and feel good and have all the pleasures of social life and all the things that came with it. And so it was just a roller coaster. And I was the guy that was leading everybody down that direction in that season of life.
Was there any one kind of... Oh, go on, what you were saying. Sorry.
No. Just to say that was, that I was whichever direction I'm going, it's all in. There's not a modesty in my bones.
And when you were in that sort of hedonistic cycle, was there a particular thing that especially you found useful to sort of cover up the pain, to replace pain with pleasure? Was there something particular which drew you, or you got stuck onto, or was it just that general lifestyle?
The rush, the excitement, the thrill, the feelings of and social status was a part of it. I was always very aware of my place in the social hierarchy and kind of working my way to the top. And that was an important part of it, and being kind of intentional on moving towards the dominant place of whatever that would be. But it was more impulsive than strategic. I think a lot of it was based on the impulse, and it was ignoring some things that I knew I should be doing as well. And the more you pile up the hedonism and the ignorance of responsibility, the more you feel like that impulsive hedonism, the more you need it to resolve the ignorance of the responsibility.
Yeah. Makes sense. Yes, it is. It's a cycle. It is a destructive cycle. It reinforces itself down. It's the journey down to hell, as it were.
Yes. And today it's like I actually would clarify myself as even a Christian hedonist. Yeah, because that's a way to find pleasure in the presence of God. Yeah, because it says in his right hand there are pleasures forevermore. And so there's actually a sense of finding true pleasure and eternal joy that doesn't fade in his presence based on scripture. And so there's an element and a category for that hedonism to coexist within a Christian worldview.
And what are the markers or distinctions that are drawn between pleasure in the presence of God and pleasure in deprivation of God?
Wow, that's a great question, bro. Yeah. I would say freedom from self is a good one to say. Freedom from self-obsession.
Okay. So when you say freedom from self-obsession, what do you mean by that?
And I'll answer your question too. contentment.
Freedom from contentment, or
No, being freedom from self and just contentment, complete contentment with where you are and who you are. And so the freedom from self would be. Wait, what was your question? One more time.
So the distinction between pleasure in the presence of God and,
Yes.
and pleasure in being deprived of God, as it were. You know, God's there.
Oh, okay.
His pleasure, and one God's not there. This is the negative cycle, as it were. So
Okay.
what are the clear things where, in this case, this is good, and in this case, this is not good?
Wow.
Yeah, go on.
Sure. Yeah, that's a good question. So what are the categories for pleasure in God versus pleasure in the world?
Yeah.
Right? And the effects of those two things.
Yeah.
Well, I would say like the source. The source is eternal versus temporal. That's one element.
Okay.
The source is life-giving versus life-taking. The source is I'll leave it at that. It's a good question, though.
I can see where you're going with the life-giving rather than life-taking side.
Okay.
This is not an ascetic interpretation of Christianity. This is a Christianity which is holistic in its embracing of certainly worldly pleasures, as long as they are put into a virtuous system. So, for instance, the sex between a married couple is an example of a life-giving kind of pleasure.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, and it's intended to be enjoyed.
Yeah.
As a gift of pleasure.
Mm.
Yeah, within the context of its design for the arrangement. And it's intended to be enjoyed deeply, and even better than what I would argue much of what the culture promotes. There's a better version of that, and richer and deeper and more satisfying available within the framework of a God-centered view of pleasure and enjoyment of pleasure in that presence.
That makes sense to me.
And you can apply that principle. That principle works with food.
Yep.
Or the gym, which I'm in, a lot every day, or with family, etc. Or work, especially work.
Makes sense. Now, there's an aspect to this, there's a part of this story, a chapter, which so far is missing.
Okay.
And it's between you being on rock bottom and you finding this objective truth. I guess what I'm interested in finding out, that is a big bottle. That is a very big.
You got to stay hydrated, bro. Come on. Gallon a day, baby.
I thought my bottle was big, but yours is like, my goodness. Here we are, comparing bottles.
Let's go. Yeah.
But, right. So, where was I? So, in terms of, when did you find this truth? When did this truth come to you? Was it brought to you? Did you go out in search of it?
The Christian worldview.
Yeah. When did it come to you? When, because you were at the bottom, right? You reached the bottom.
Yeah. It came. The package was delivered to my door.
Right.
Yeah, and I didn't want any. I wasn't looking for help. Remember, that's not who I was.
No. And
my previous experiences with that type of, with religion or with God, with church in general, were distasteful. And I had no category for that in my life. But when someone came in and argued with me for a little bit as to why I should consider it, I allowed myself to experience it. And so that's when it came in.
Okay.
Yeah.
What were the initial turn-offs, as a child going to church? What put you off about that? What was it? What about it didn't capture your attention?
Um, I didn't see a need for it. And I saw the people within it. And I mean, I grew up in a situation where it was modeled for me. So I grew up in a home that had a Christian worldview, but it was not demonstrated in what I would argue is a tangible, authentic way. And so I didn't see a real representation of it that had an impact on me. I just didn't see the need for it, especially once the family whole situation kind of caused, the family division and all the stuff that happened. It's like I just don't see a need. And I became very independent, so I didn't want to need anything or anyone.
Okay, makes sense. So first of all, I'm going to turn on the light because it's getting quite dark here. Hang on just a second. I'll be right back.
All right, man.
Okay, so
yeah,
let's switch tack to, well, is your YouTube channel the main thing you do? You have a job outside of that? Do you do anything else?
I do. I have 2 jobs. I'm a pastor.
Yeah.
And a business owner.
Okay.
Business owner came first, but that wasn't the plan either. And then pastor came later, and that definitely wasn't the plan. but here I am.
Okay. So what was the business?
I own a recruiting company.
Yeah. And what got you into recruiting?
Well, it was given to me. Someone I know very closely that had said, I think you'd be good at doing this and running this. And I said, it wasn't really in my future, but I'll take a look at it. And ended up buying the business for very cheap and making a really good return in that first year, and just stayed with it and enjoyed it. I enjoy business a great deal. I learned that a lot about just business principles and how to how to make deals, negotiations. I love to sell, make deals, find ways to maximize opportunities, to leverage strengths and weaknesses in people, to build teams, to help people identify their strengths and weaknesses. So like a lot about business, and even the recruiting business as a whole, which is you being an NE, Dom, would appreciate is seeing into people's talents and seeing into people's abilities and calling out those strengths and weaknesses in them and helping them gain clarity on who they are and to grow in their own self-understanding and potential in the workplace. So anyway, love business, loved it a great deal, and especially the recruiting company or recruiting industry that I'm in.
Makes sense. And did you have to go through any sort of course for that, or just sort of it was sort of given, you got it, and you ran with it? How did it, how what was that first step you thought, right, I'm going to do this?
Yeah, it's funny because I was actually training to be a firefighter. I went to fire academy, was on my path to be a firefighter, and that was where I was at. I was working for a moving company. It was a moving firefighter company that was kind of paying my way through undergrad. A degree in business, and then ended up doing a master's in business because someone suggested that I had leadership abilities and skills, and so they were like, hey, you should go get an MBA in leadership. And so I did, and It was right at the end of getting the MBA that the business opportunity came to me. And so it just was the timing of it that just made a lot of sense. And so jumped right in and learned along the way. The business degree that I got was more leadership oriented, which is different than entrepreneurship. And I would say I'm more of an entrepreneur by default. I do enjoy leading, and that's what gives me a lot of energy and motivation and inspiration. But I'm more of the starter and catalyst is what I've noticed about myself. And even in ministry as a pastor, that's a big word with a lot of categories underneath what that could mean. I'm on the fringes where I'm a church planter type pastor, which is the one that goes and gets the churches started. The one that's kind of the visionary that gets everybody around the shared goal to get things going.
Right.
And so, yeah, I learned that pretty early.
So that's interesting. So your style is to come along to a new place, a new community. And you get the ball rolling, and then you're off to another place to get the ball rolling elsewhere.
That would be like the lifestyle of my dreams. But my wife and kids, as you understand, need stability. And so my job as the leader of my home is to provide that. Now, if it were up to me, I'd go start something in a new city every 3 to 5 years. And that'd be the rush, because it's very hard for me to stay the course. It's very tough. But my word of the year, for example, we have a word of the year we use every year to try and grow within. This year, as a matter of fact, is stay the course. It's just stay the course that you're on. You're going to have a new idea or a new vision or a new opportunity. Something out there is going to come in, and you're going to want to take it and jump after it and go, because that's what energizes me, is the new thing.
Yeah. And
maintaining the old thing and the details and the routine gets very old, and I lose all my energy. But that's the growth area for me, is staying the course. And so that's what I try and do.
So given that a lot of how you like to do things is sort of starting up, moving on, but you're also working on staying that course. What does visions that you have look like? What's an example of a vision?
Yeah. So, man, that's a great question. And I always have vision that's corresponding to reality. Again, so a vision would be, let's just say financial vision. Could simply be that you want to be debt free, or I want to be debt free by the end of the year, right? Yeah. Tangible vision of, we're going to complete this in this course of time.
Yeah.
Or it could be that when we're moving to a new state next in 3 months to start a new church. And I intend on being there for a very long time to stay the course. Now, the vision there is to make an impact on the people, on the city. And I don't mean just spiritually, although that's core, because I believe that objective truth, and within that framework, that the most impact I can have on a person is through the Christian message of truth. So that's there, but it's also in every category of life. So a vision of making an impact in people's emotional lives, the broken, the hurting, the weak, the oppressed, wanting to bring justice to those places that are where there's mercies. People are at the mercy of injustice, wanting to see families redeemed and relationships restored within that place, wanting to see the nonprofits that are already functioning well and serving the community, wanting to see even the businesses in the area. We plan to bring a coffee shop into that place that's going to serve the community and bless the community with from an economic standpoint. Yeah. Then we're going to use I could keep going, but you can kind of see how it's a tangible vision that I want to bring forward.
Makes sense. It's like lots of different things that all lean towards this sort of overall cause, as it were.
Yes, absolutely. An overall cause, mission, and an impact. I want to see a tangible impact in a place.
Yes.
Which And that's at odds, because that actually requires you stay the course.
Yeah.
To see a tangible impact and a legacy, you have to stay put.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. See what else I can ask you. So, at what point did you start a family?
Yeah, man. I've got 4 kids.
Yeah.
Yeah, and been married for 8 years.
Mm-hmm. And was that after the Damascene moment when you?
Yeah, that was after. Yeah, that was after. Mm-hmm.
I see. And I guess the question is, how was going from that down in the dumps to where you are now, and becoming a family man?
Yeah.
What was it like for you? What was that journey like for you? How did you have to change to be a family man?
How did you have to change personally to become a family man? Gosh, there had to be a target. There had to be an ideal.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's old things that have to die and new things that have to come alive. And that's everyone's journey. And I think it's a matter of dying to what's killing you and becoming alive to those life-giving properties that I would argue again are ultimately found in God, and allowing Him to make that transformation. So
it's like a mini resurrection, as it were.
That's a good way to say it. Yeah, that would be the biblical way to apply that, because there's an objective resurrection that happened in history. And the argument is that from a Christian worldview, that took place, right, first century. That there was an objective one where one person did rise from the dead, and there's arguments objectively for why that could have happened in history.
Yeah.
But subjectively, there is an experience of resurrection by following that person. And so it is actually that. And then the argument continues to go from one experience of resurrection to daily resurrection. Yeah. To where it's every day there's a death of self. And my time personally in the morning in scripture and prayer and meditation is actually a funeral. It's a daily funeral to myself, that I would have new life.
Yeah.
Yeah. In the spirit.
So tell me about the journey to be a pastor. How did that? There's one thing being, there's one thing taking on this perspective and faith. There's another thing to become a leader, to lead a flock.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. It's a big jump. I was just serving. I had just become a Christian and began to follow that path. And people had noticed on my leadership and teaching gifts, and then put me in those roles and said, "Hey, would you help us start a ministry?" That was one of the first things they said. And of course, it's a starting activation type of thing. And so I'm jumping all into it. And so I began to start ministries and lead and teach. And it was just something that I found fulfilling to me. And over time, sensed, despite my wiring being very different from your average pastor. And that's why there's a lot of conflict with me being in ministry now, is because I don't actually have the standard attributes of what you think of as a pastor. And I get into, I get a lot of pushback, and I'm in a lot of confrontational type discussions, and I have a very aggressive personality, more bold. And so I don't tend to pick up on emotional cues. Unless my wife is kicking me under the table and saying, dude, listen, what are you doing? Pick up, what are you doing? And so it's kind of a contradiction that I would be a pastor, right? And that's it, but that's a growth area of trying to learn that empathy, trying to learn to be compassionate, and trying to learn to deal with emotions in a way that is not aggressive or on maybe illogically, maybe they aren't justified, and to still allow you to feel that way. That's a challenge, because I view emotions as a form of weakness naturally and don't want to feel them necessarily. And so when I see someone feeling them unjustified, all I want to do is solve the problem. Here's the truth. Deal with that. Here's and I typically want to be honest in those situations. In any kind of pastoral meeting or any kind of meetings, I value honesty. And so to me, honesty is real, right? And honesty is how we deal with things. And that can just come across to some people who are sensitive as overwhelming. And so just being wired that way has been a very tough, that's been a tough journey. That's been a tough journey, but I got nudged into it for certain leadership and teaching gifts that are applicable to ministry. And there's an element to, again, that contradiction, that irony, that paradox that in scripture that talks about God may put people in places where his power is made perfect in their weakness. And there's an element of me operating in weakness so that I would be dependent on that power and not my own.
It's interesting to me because on the one hand, I see someone who is very inclined towards a spiritual language, not spiritual language in terms of just being a pastor, but spiritual in terms of speaking thematically and speaking emotively on topics. And there is a sense of profoundness in what you say and how that is conveyed in a way which should ring true in people's minds and lead to people aligning to the truth you want to share. So I'm seeing that on one hand. On the other hand, I hear what you're telling me. And you're telling me you're someone who's a natural entrepreneur, that you're someone who is not in touch with emotional cues, someone who's had to be nudged to the table when they have these emotional cues, someone who, to some degree, right? Okay, someone who, at the same time, very much into sports from a young age, and there's a guidance there when you were younger as well to be into sports. I'm wondering how much we're talking about the naturally wired Justin and the raised Justin. That Justin has been raised to be this sort of way. I'm trying to figure out where are your natural strengths and where are things you sort of been pushed into being. Because when I'm talking to you, what I'm seeing very emotive language. I'm seeing very thematic language. General way of talking about things. Clearly, ideas and concepts and also trends and visions are coming out. I don't get, and sometimes when you sort of like, I need to think about how to answer this, it's when I'm pinpointing very, very logical, concrete clarity things. And so I'm getting the impression of someone who actually is an intuitive, ethical type in psionics. But I'm hearing things, but they're telling me someone who's more sensory and logical. So I'm trying to figure that out at the moment. It's interesting to me.
I sense and feel that same tension.
Yeah. Tell me, how do you experience that tension?
Well, from a socionics framework, or
from any framework, from how you, well, I guess if you are, in terms of you looking at sociology and trying to figure yourself out, it could be. But also just how you figure out in terms of who are you, who have you been made to be, what are you?
Yeah. And so let me unravel one more thing too that may uncover some more. Is there's always been a battle for me with again, knowing the self accurately. That's always been a challenge.
Yeah.
Self-awareness came way later in life. And again, I use it as a tool to understand myself and understand people, and to communicate in their languages, to build teams, and then to understand what's going on inside of here. Because there's a lot of fluctuating stuff.
Yeah.
And the tension that I feel that you're talking about is that, like, any given moment, there could be a different expression of what that function could be. For me, which has been hard for me to accurately see myself. And then, like you're saying, it's been, I think, equally hard for, in my experience with the typing journey, with typology, no matter which system you're using, for the other person to discern accurately which functions are being used.
Yes.
So I'm aware of what you're saying. I don't know how to pull out the explanation for it.
Makes sense. One thing I'll also say, I am seeing plenty of extroverted intuition. I see someone who is very comfortable with different ideas, concepts. You like the starting phase. You like the phase where there's the greatest amount of potential. The problem for you is sticking the course. You want to go over to a new place with new potential. Sticking the course is often involved. People who tend to settle down, the details involved in settling down, the logistical elements, is sort of off-putting to you. Whereas you are saying a catalyst. What is a catalyst? It's not someone who directly drives impact. It's someone who, by being there and having an effect on people around them, leads to something happening.
Yeah.
It's in its very nature, it is not direct and physical. It is a communication across the airwaves to another person, to stimulate and to induce their actions.
Yeah.
So that's also interesting to me. That's also suggesting more of an intuitive, more ethical type. If you were to move across to, say, type like an IEE, they are very much the catalysts. They don't want to impose what they think at all. They want to help be someone who catalyzes other people in recognizing their potential and developing their potential. I don't think you are a delta. I think a beta type makes a lot more sense in terms of the values. I don't know. In terms of beta, what I mean by that, from sort of a Myers-Briggs perspective, the NFJs, the STPs. In socionics, this is going to be the types who have extroverted ethics and introverted intuition as a valued thing to give. So not just comfortable, nice emotions, but profound, meaningful, spiritually significant, relevant emotions, things which are going in some sort of way and have some sort of cause. Also types which bond together introverted logic and extroverted sensation. This is about objective truth, you could say. Structures, rules which are unbending and unchanging in reality, because that is the true truth, as it were. Then there's no way of getting around that. There's no questioning it. It is there. If you don't follow these rules, life will make things very clear to you you've transgressed in that kind of way. And so there's that mix in terms of the truth is objective. I had to realize that truth. And it was an environment of subjectivity. I had these emotions, I had these desires. I went down the wrong course. But what I liked about the wrong course was the feeling of status, the feeling of a thrill and excitement, sort of intensity in my social position. These things all sort of beta draws you could say. But then one of the big draws is actually the salvation was finding this objective reality through Christianity, recognizing that and orientating your life around it. So that I think Peter makes a lot of sense. And you being someone who is about making an impact, whether a spiritual or physical impact, being that person who creates that, but in a sort of capitalizing kind of way. So I'm trying to layer this in terms of the different relative strengths. I think within Peter, I think it's very clear you are an extrovert. So what do I mean by that? I mean someone who is pushing both the extroverted ethics, so the emotion side, raising the emotional feeling in a room or an environment, contributing to people's passion, you could say, for something, expressing your own passion authentically. In your case, very important is authentic self-expression. Emotive language is free-flowing in that respect. The other side is the extroverted sensation. This is the physical impact, taking action, being decisive, being, well, in terms of status, being in the sort of higher status, having more muchness to you compared to, say, someone else. So that side I'm seeing being pushed, and the parts that you're more receptive to, rather than the parts you are the one pushing. That is first the vision, the long-term outcome. Where are things going to go? What is meaningful? The path of meaning and significance versus the path of triviality and mundanity. And on the other, the receiving of a logical truth, rules, structures, and understanding of how it fits together. So beta energizer makes sense in that regard. So it's basically two types I'm looking between, EIE and the SL. Now, these are a bit like the ENFJ or ESTP. They're not exactly the same. There's slight differences between the systems. But what we'd say about the EIE first, ethical intuitive energizer, this is a type where they start with that sense of emotional significance, what is meaningful, what is authentic, what is profound, and what carries that passion, energy, what makes them feel excited about it, and how to convey that excitement to others in an almost infectious way. And they also have, right from the start, that sense of potential, ideas, possibilities, coming up with new ideas and perspectives. You get to say the points where they're weakest. This is going to be, first of all, the day-to-day details, making sure that that balance and harmony in the day-to-day is there. You know, being able to stop and settle in one space and make that space harmonious and sustainable. And also structure, laying down clear, coherent, crisp rules of things, bring things into an absolute clarity that can't be questioned. EIEs are types which are trying to seek that clarity in life, because for them the ambiguity can actually be unpleasant to them. It's not satisfactory. They want a clarity in life. They are seeking that assurance. Otherwise, they can end up self-doubting. And as they get stronger, they get more bold, they get more decisive. They start to be, no, I can take everything on. I am the big tough person as well. It wasn't necessarily that to start off with. They have moments of great insecurity, and they cycle between self-doubt and that decisive action. So that's one type. You've then got the other type, the SB, right? This is one which has started out in the physical and the real. They tend to naturally live life from moment to moment. What can I do? What advantage can I get? How can I move? How can I get this? How can I move this forwards? Very much in the here, very tactical in their thinking, naturally very assertive right from the beginning. The EIE becomes more assertive over time. SE is always assertive. And they got a very factual, pragmatic mind. How do things work? How can I use this data and information to get what I want more effectively? And they've got the structure supporting. They're the ones quite quickly saying, it's obvious that this is how it is. That is obviously not the case. And they're very happy to be in that sort of debate, cut and thrust environment where they're laying out what is obviously the case and what is not the case. they're the ones who can struggle with the deeper sense of meaning and knowing what that is. And they kind of need someone else to provide that sense of profoundness and transcendence in their life. They got the structure and work things out. They want this almost spiritual feeling of where that is going, a cause to fight for, because they're already a fighter. But what are they fighting for? They don't know. They can see facts, they can see how it works, but they don't know what the cause actually is. So one side is looking for that objective truth certainty because they don't have it themselves. The other's looking for an almost spiritual transcendence and a sense of where this is actually, what is all leading towards. So I guess those two portraits is ringing a bell now for you say.
Which of those is ringing a bell?
Yeah.
1 second, buddy. 1 second. That's a great distinction. So first of all, it's interesting that you draw upon the TEF or the FETI axis, because that's been a debate of my own. Has it been? Is it TEFI or FETI? And you're seeing FETI in both.
Yeah.
Which is interesting in itself, because there are so many. You talk about identity and discovering, even from discovering an objective self. And discovering that with clarity and structure. And part of the typology framework does offer that, so you can discover that and then express that. So there has been underneath a lot of searches is discovering who the person is, and then by discovery of the accurate objective information, being able to express based on that information. And this is why I love my OPS friends. Amazing. But the challenges that I find there is that they are using what I would call subjective logic, and that it works in the moment by boiling down definitions to very simplistic forms that apply practically but may not be in essence true. Therefore, is problematic for me. Because it's not ringing true objectively.
That makes sense. So this, I'm not laughing at you, that's fine, don't worry. I'm laughing. Not laughing at that, but no, I was laughing at, you said this is a temporary. In a way, you said this is it's a subjective logic, and then but the idea, what do you mean by subjective? And then you laid out what it was, that these truths are too much limited to situations and practicalities of those situations, right?
They work in the moment, and that's fine. I mean, I love organizing systems and making things work practically in the moment, but to me, that's subjective logic. You can change it at any point in time. It's not objectively corresponding to reality or truth.
This is it. This is what you're describing is TE.
Yeah, TEs. I'm just using that framework of subjective logic because it's not necessarily corresponding to objective truth, but it is logical in its application.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. That is, I think FETI makes a lot of sense, right?
It's interesting because I've been wrestling with that. DJ, who's been recommended talking to you, he's seen that as well in the past. I just have so much lack of empathy, and that being a problem in my relationships for a long period of time, and being insensitive to the emotional mood, and being more just unaware of what people are feeling and thinking in the moment, and just more concerned about saying the truth, especially if there's an injustice. I take responsibility for any injustice in the environment. And so it's my job to bring justice to whatever environment I'm in. I naturally just take that responsibility. And so if there's any unfairness or any manipulation, emotional manipulation, I have to speak out and handle that. And so that at times causes conflict.
Right. What I will say is that EIEs, they have a blind spot. So do SLEs, right? Every type has a blind spot. When it comes to EIEs, the blind spot is introverted sensation.
Okay.
Now, what does that mean, introverted sensation? Well, how does that relate? When it comes to EIEs, these are types who are very good at understanding what the mood needs to be. And there'll be a type who can affect and change the mood the way they want it to be. And they can line that up towards the strategic outcome. Where is this mood going to be? How is this mood going to carry us through into the long run? They're very good at shaping that. But in the moment, right, if they feel something bubbling over, they'll express themselves authentically, and that could disrupt the pre-existing mood. Is for them, right?
Yeah.
The mood is theirs to control. They are the leader of the mood, no one else. They often don't like it when they're around someone else who's trying to control the mood differently.
100%.
An EIE and an ESE in the room together, it's like, this town ain't big enough for the both of us. And usually the ESE wins because the ESE is more present than the EIE, and the EIE doesn't like it. But the point is, what the EIE disregards at every single opportunity is introverted sensation, which is the present flow and harmony of the moment. That's different to the mood. It's not the emotional energy. It's more the quality of the present focus, which can be, it bonds with extroverted ethics in an ESE or an SEI. But an EIE, they don't see that. They see the emotional excitation and the energy and what are the more profound consequences for that. So an EIE, if they're upset, they're going to put everyone else on edge. And for them, it's like, that's their they say, I can't help but be who I am, and I express myself authentically in that way. And the point is, they're lending that towards the future rather than the pleasantness in the present. The pleasantness in the present is actually unimportant to them because it's not something which is leading towards something greater or more important. It's all trivial. They are designed to create discomfort to get people to think, to drop feelings that are leading somewhere.
Interesting. Well, and then to see FE in that would make some sense of how the conflict that I do cause is for a purpose. You know, I'm doing it for a reason. I have a motivation that's rooted in something that needs to be done or said for the right reason, for some value, something like that. And then after, if I've hurt someone's feelings, and I take ownership for that, it's not ideal. It's not who I want to be. But when that happens, I want to restore the relationship, and I want to bring immediate harmony back in. And I don't like there being that discord because I want to resolve the issue and bring closure to it. And I want that to be settled and done. It's like, if you're going to get in a fight, you know, with somebody, you box it out, you deal with the issue, and afterwards you have a hug and you're friends. Maybe you're better friends. But the idea is that you need to go in and be honest.
Yeah.
And that's required for that to be an authentic relationship.
Makes sense. And that is a beautiful thing in general, right? If you are upset about something, you hash it out. You don't keep it to yourself. One thing beta types hate is someone who silently disapproves. Without raising anything, not bringing any sort of complaints to the table. They're just like, such a shame.
Yeah, like if I read a room and I know that if I know someone is holding a grudge of some kind or is not saying something that they know they want to say, I'll speak up on behalf of the room.
Yeah.
Or I'll make sure that that person that has that lodge stoned in their heart talks about it. We need to talk about that. I don't want to sweep anything under the rug. And that's part of my problem, is that I force people to bring things out from under the rug to deal with all the issues. And they don't want to deal with it, but I need them to deal with it. And I force it. I force that. It's very forceful, which ends up causing disharmony. But my goal is to bring harmony. Like, that's what I want to do.
But that's with a blind spot. You think you're creating harmony, you're not. You don't actually know what harmony is necessarily, but you want to straighten out the relationships with people and actually get people's, resentments, festering things out there and
Yes.
discuss and refresh.
Yes. Requires truth. Yeah.
I'm going to say we're out of time for now, Justin, but we've
Yeah.
got to follow up
It's good stuff.
why I do this, because sometimes the conversation needs more than 1 hour to actually work out someone's type. Yeah, I think we should book in some time for next week and have another go at it. We know we've narrowed it down from 60 to 2, really. I don't.
That's pretty good.
But I look forward to speaking to you.
Hey, thanks, man. Yeah, it's been a good conversation.
Thank you. Let's just check very quickly people's comments. What are people saying? Let's see, because I deliberately ignore comments now because it distracts me. I'm trying to talk, but I look at it afterwards. Let's see.
Sure.
Is this a typing session? Quick typing SLE from Fate. Fate thinks that he's an SE user right now because he talks about how goal-oriented he is. Well, quick typing. Just Jason thinks SEE is still in play. DJ says you're SEE. Interesting. SEE people are saying. SE or IE is probably people are thinking. LSI. Okay, it's just going all over the place basically. But Nelson, he's taken a turn for SLE. Right. So they've gone towards SLE. No one really put forward EIE in that discussion. But okay. Good. We'll see what happens in the next week. I look forward to it.
Okay.
Justin, thank you so much for coming on here, doing it publicly. I say we don't.
Thanks. I hope this is helpful. To the community, and that's the goal.
It's good. I look forward to speaking to you again soon.
Thanks, man.
And thank you everyone for tuning in. Take care.